like to introduce Bernd and his session about situation awareness for journalists, which will be a theoretical and practical workshop. Also, if you have any questions after the session or during it, please wait for the microphone so we can catch the sound on the video recording. So, next, Bernd.
Thank you. So, welcome everybody for this, well, it's not a practical workshop, it's more kind of a lecture, but if you have any questions, don't wait for the session to end. I have no idea how long we will talk, maybe some 3 or 4 hours, so it makes no sense that you wait with your question till the talk is finished. If you have any questions, raise your hand immediately so we can discuss your question, and I will try to give an answer. This is not really a technical thing. This is actually a talk directed at journalists. So are any journalists here in the audience? Well, at least 2. Free. We're kind of all journalists, aren't we? So my background, of course, is being a hacker. I've been involved in the hacker movement for quite a while. And the reason why I care about what journalists do and how to protect them is the Holland Foundation. I'm on the board of the Holland Foundation, which is one of the financial backers of WikiLeaks. So we have been in contact with these procedures of publishing and source protection for quite a while. And of course, it was the Snowden revelations that in many journalists arose the necessity to think about their security, especially if they work with electronic devices. So this talk will introduce you into what I call situation awareness. Let's start with a quote from George Orwell. He once said that journalism is printing is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations. Or let's add sport reporting. But if you're an investigative journalist, of course you talk about things that expose misconduct of powerful people and institutions. And these people, of course, don't want these facts to be in the open. Sometimes they try to prevent that with all costs. So these someones mentioned here will not love you for what you do. On the contrary, it's much more likely that they go after you in every possible way, threatening you, sue you, spy on you, discredit you, go after your family and friends. And like Barrett Brown, that is an American journalist who wrote and published material on the private sector of the surveillance companies. You can even end up in jail for publishing just links to documents. Just like him, more than 300 journalists and bloggers worldwide are currently in prison, just before they do their work of investigative journalism. That is something you probably cannot prevent. That is the risk you have to live with if you're a journalist. But of course, you can only print or publish a story if you have one. And even if you're a very brilliant journalist, it's pretty unlikely that you can do it all alone. You need an insider. You need someone, you need a source to tell you about the facts and to pass on documents and to help you write the story. So you are just the publisher, you're not the source of the story. But why should anyone trust you? Why should someone contact you and pass on information at all? I mean, if they don't know you personally before, the only thing they can possibly know about you is what is your professional reputation in this context? How many high-profile stories have you published without sacrificing the source? As I said, there are risks and threats you personally may encounter while working on your story, but the person that needs the most protection is not you, it's your source. As a journalist, you usually have at least some legal protection, at least in most countries, but your source usually does not. If whistleblowers are identified as such, they all suffer the same severe consequences. First, they lose their job. Then they lose their reputation, then they lose their friends, their spouse, their house, and finally they end up, well, as casts off in this society. if they are lucky. If not, they may even end up in jail for a long, long time. If you fail to provide such a protection for your source, as much as possible, your source may be identified and suffer aforementioned consequences. And your reputation as a good journalist, well, it will go down with the drain with it. So protecting your source should also be your self-interest, if nothing else. Protection, and especially source protection, is not just a technical issue. Although the rest of this talk will focus on some technical countermeasures you can take. But a good part of the source protection is also to provide psychological support, because people feel the urge to talk about things they do, sources do, whistleblowers do. And sometimes they talk to the wrong people. You certainly have heard of Chelsea Manning, the US Army whistleblower that leaked the collateral murder video, the Afghan and Iraq war logs, and the diplomatic cables of the US to WikiLeaks for publishing. WikiLeaks provided the best technical protection measures possible and for contacting and submitting documents to them. But in the end, that didn't suffice for Chelsea. In a chat with Adrian Lamo, under false pretenses grifted her confidence, she openly talked about the leaks and her involvement. Too bad for her that Lamo was collaborating with the FBI, a fact that ultimately led to the arrest of Manning in Iraq in May 2010. And now she's serving a 35-year sentence at the maximum security US disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth. So 35 years. For you as a journalist, as well as for the media outlet you are working for, there are several stages involving source protection. The first thing is the first contact. As I mentioned, this is the very crucial part of any protection you can give to a source. How can a source contact you in the first place? What's the first contact? Phone calls and emails are a very, very bad idea. Today we are living in a world of total surveillance, and every such actions can be traced back even months after they occurred. The best way is to inform possible sources on how to anonymously and safely contact you without pointing a finger on them. A good way to do that is to have such instructions, for example, printed in every issue of your newspaper or magazine, or to include it on the front page of your website. So reading the newspaper or visiting the website is something many people will do, and reading and following such instructions is not suspicious in itself. So the normal reader is basically identical to a possible whistleblower or source. So you can instruct them how to safely contact you, and I will later go back on how to do that technically. I will show you the example of how WikiLeaks does that. The next step, of course, is submitting documents. After you made the first contact, the source will probably want to pass on documents to you so that you can write your story. Depending on how physically close you are to your source in the process, that decides on what are the best way to do it. Of course, you can meet in the dark in a park and pass on documents in printed form or on USB sticks or whatever. But if the source is far away located, the only way is to transfer them electronically. So you need something like a submission platform where people can securely and anonymously transfer information to you. This certainly includes the use of special programs like Tor and Tails, which we will learn later. And it can be hard to achieve for some sources without computer knowledge. I mean, not every leak is a high-profile leak. Imagine a nurse in a hospital who sees some bad things going on in the hospital, and she wants to talk about it. She wants to expose the misconduct happening. Of course, she is not a trained computer security specialist, right, who knows how to use things. So she needs a very, very basic but still secure way to submit documents to you. And the main part we will concentrate on is once you got the stories, your source is still not safe. While you're working with your documents on your computer, whenever you leak or whenever someone finds these documents on your computer or gets access to them, the sources can still be under a threat. So And this is the most time you spend on the story. You're working on documents. You're trying to do stuff with them. Nowadays, because of all the whistleblowers we had in the past, starting with Chelsea Manning or Edward Snowden, of course, most institutions that have to hide something know about the danger of whistleblowing for them. And they know they cannot prevent people from whistleblowing because it's this moral imperative for them to tell the truth is something an institution or a government or an agency cannot prevent. So they know people will leak documents. For them, it's only important to find the whistleblowers and to execute an example on them so that others, out of fear, finally don't do it. So now they have very sophisticated techniques to watermark documents, for example, on an individual basis to find out who leaked the document. We will learn about that in the talk. Situation awareness, which is the title of this talk, what does that actually mean? I mean, it's actually something that comes out of the military or the aviation in an environment where to be aware of a situation, to know what the situation is, to know what the threats in the situation are, the ways you can act, and the outcome of your action is in a very close feedback loop. And so situation awareness for journalists is nothing different. You need to perceive, you need to perceive the environment. That means you need to know what your environment is. You need to understand how it works. You need to know how it is built. Then you need the meaning and the significance of the situation. It means you have to judge the situation correctly. What's the threat? And you need to decide what actions to take based on your threat assessment. That's something that is not taught in journalist schools usually, but it's a very important thing for people to understand, especially for journalists to understand if they want to protect their work, especially in the digital age. So of course there are different influence factors here, and the only thing we can do is to focus on the individual factors. So one of the most important individual factors here, of course, is knowledge and training and experience and abilities. That means if you do not understand how to protect yourself, you cannot act accordingly to the situation. It's very important that you understand what technical countermeasures you have available to protect yourself and your source. So, of course, it starts with to find out where are you. And journalists, of course, are in very different situations. They can be in a newsroom, they can be on the road, or they can be on the front line. And of course, there can be any situation in between. They can be traveling, for example. So let's start with a very simple case. You're just traveling. You're a journalist, and your boss told you, well, go to Syria and do a reporting on the war there. So you have to travel. You have to go to an airport. You have to fly. You have to arrive. You have to book into a hotel. So just a small example in the beginning. So let's assume you're at the airport. What should you do or what should you not do? Of course, the most important thing is if you suspect being spied on, and you are being spied on, switch off your cell phone. You ever wondered why there are so much technique when you embark? That's not just for controlling your passport or stuff. They have so-called IMSI catches, so to link your identity, because you show your passport at that very moment, they link your passport with your cell phone. So whenever your cell phone pops up somewhere else, they know it's you. And that's only possible if you have your cell phone switched on, which most people do. They don't care. They switch it off in the plane, and then they do it reluctantly, right? Because they need their cell phone. But that's a very bad idea, especially if you arrive in a country which is probably in an environment that is more hostile than your home country is to you. They want to know who is using which cell phone, and they do not have the registration records for your SIM card or for your phone, right? They do not have that, but they can link that together at the airport, and they do. So what should you do? I mean, let's say you know a lot about computer security and you have encrypted your files. At the border, your computer can be inspected, and some countries actually do that. And then they can ask you to surrender the passwords to your encrypted files. And believe it or not, there are some countries where it's a crime not to surrender your password. If you go to the UK, for example, they can ask you for the password of your encrypted files. And if you do not give them, you can theoretically go to jail. I mean, normally they just expel you, so you cannot enter the country, but it's possible you go to jail. The same with Israel. So don't surrender your passphrase. Be prepared not to surrender your passphrase. When you arrive, buy an anonymous SIM card. If you need your phone, don't use the phone and the SIM card you already have from your home country. Buy a new phone very cheaply. It does not need to have to be a smartphone. Smartphones are bad anyway in that context. Buy a simple phone, buy a new anonymously SIM card, and you're pretty much safe. Okay, now you arrive at the hotel, and everyone thinks, okay, even if it's a hostile country, now I arrive in my hotel, and that feels like a safe place. But because journalists all hang around in bars and hotels, right? I mean, that's their job, in a way. So they feel safe. It feels like a safe area to be, but it's not. I mean, at the registration, they hand you out some kind of security simulation where you think, okay, only I will be able to enter my room. But of course, that's not true. It's very easy to circumvent all these electronic locks. May they be based on chip cards, may they be based on RFIDs or whatever they give you. It does not work. Same with the hotel safe. Never put anything relevant into a hotel safe and believe that nobody else can access it. They can, and they probably will if they want to get to your laptop or to documents you store there. Don't use the networks there. Don't trust the networks you have in a hotel. I mean, quite a few people mapped out what, for example, and this is not against a certain country, but if you travel to the Gulf region, I mean, most of the Emirates, if you go to a hotel, they have a software installed called Finfisher. You probably heard about. This kind of software has nothing else than infecting your computer with malware that can track and trace you and get access to your files by just using their Wi-Fi to, for example, update your operating system or to download some files. Don't trust their networks, and you need to know what countermeasures you have available to use, because you need the connectivity to the internet. You need to communicate with your newspaper at home, with other sources, with friends, whatever. But don't trust the network as it is. Never. Okay, so let's assume that you have a working environment, and I want to show you in which ways your environment can be compromised. What you have to know, just to know, not that what is possible to compromise your environment. So let's start with talking about what are you using, what equipment do you use? Of course, you use a computer, usually a laptop if you're on the road. If you're in the newsroom, you probably have a PC as well, but on the road you usually have a laptop. And the laptop, of course, or the computer itself is composed of hardware. You all know that. You have a keyboard, you have a mouse, you have a monitor to display things. You have a network connection so that you can communicate with the network. You have some kind of storage, either built-in or removable storage like USB drives. You're running software on your computer. especially your operating system, depending on what kind of what brand of computer you are using. You might have different kinds of operating systems on it. You're running applications to write things, to write emails, to receive emails, to browse the web, all different kinds of applications. People also use the smartphone or a tablet with them because it's more easily to carry, especially if you do not want to carry your laptop into, well, let's say a war zone or whatever, so you probably try to reduce the equipment you're carrying. And sometimes you use something like a printer. We will come back to that later. Then you have to understand, how do you communicate? How do you use your equipment for your work? Of course, you still use paper. Journalists still use paper. That makes sense in some ways, and in some ways it doesn't. And I will show you why. You will use the web to communicate, of course. You will use web browsers. You will use emails. You will probably use even social media, like Facebook, Twitter, or Google. You will can use instant messaging, which is kind of a chat application. You may even use voice over IP or video messaging like Skype. Sometimes you want to exchange data with others by exchanging removable media like USB sticks. So you put something on a USB stick and give it to someone and say, plug it into your computer so you can read my documents. So that's also a way of communication. Given that situation that you know what you're working with and how you use these things, we can start talking about the risks you're under. So what are the 3 critical risks of working with electronic media or with digital computers in a journalistic context? So the question is, what is threatened? The first thing, of course, is confidentiality. That can be your own that can be the confidentiality of the documents you're working with. Sometimes you do not want to expose what you're working with to others for good reasons. This, of course, is usually for journalists a limited thing. I mean, there is a point in time where you publish your documents or where you publish your story. At that point, it's no longer necessary to hide it, right? But while it's not published, while you're working on it, and maybe even parts of the documents will never be published, you want to keep your confidentiality on the documents. Of course, you want to ensure the integrity of the documents as well. Integrity in this case means you do not want them changed by someone. I mean, it's very hard to change printed documents. So if someone gets your documents, takes them, and wants to change something, it's very hard. It's a complicated process, and you probably will detect any manipulation. Manipulating electronic documents is and you will never know. Sometimes someone can change your document and you don't even know. And of course you want to prevent that. You want the integrity of the documents be protected. And of course the anonymity is an important issue. It can be your anonymity, but most of all it's the anonymity of the source, as I said before. The source protection must be your first and primary objective. It's not about your anonymity, it's about the anonymity of the source or the people you talk to. So, of course, this gives a nice thing, right? It's a CIA. So if you ever want to remember what is threatened, just remember the CIA. It's confidentiality, it's integrity, and it's your anonymity. And of course, you have to know who is my adversary, who is threatening me, and why. So you need to think about the motives and the determination of your adversary. Who is my adversary? As an investigative journalist, that can be anything from a private person to an institution to a government. What opportunities does my adversary really have? So what can he actually do? What skills does he have? I mean, if you're against an isolated criminal, of course that person has probably less skills to threaten you electronically than, for example, a government or an agency. And of course you need to know what methods are available to them to threaten you, to threaten your confidentiality, integrity, and anonymity. Okay, let's go through, because we have not that much time as I usually do for this talk. I usually do this this kind of lecture for journalists in a publishing house, and it usually takes a whole day, so we only have less than half a time. So if it's too fast, just tell me. Okay, so what is threatened? As I said, your computer is made up of components, and one of the most important components is the input device. How is that threatened? Quite a few people use wireless keyboards, for example, right? Which is a nice thing. You do not have these cables lying around, and you can move freely. You can still type in something, but you're not connected by a wire. Bad idea. It is a comfortable thing, but it's, from a security standpoint, it's a very bad idea. Look at this unsuspicious device. Looks like a USB charger. It actually works as a USB charger. So if you plug in a USB cable here, you can charge your phone. But built into this device is something that can sniff the traffic of a wireless keyboard and a mouse and transmit the things to someone else outside of the building. Nobody will notice that this is something dangerous. You just plug it into an office, and you can actually sniff all the keyboard traffic going around there. This, of course, works only in one building or in a room in a building. If you want to do that from the outside, you need a little other equipment, but that's actually also available. You have to probably build it yourself. This is not a gun, even if it looks like. This is a Bluetooth sniffer device. So you just point to the place where someone is communicating over Bluetooth or a wireless keyboard, and you can record the signals pretty easily to find out what's being typed on the keyboard. But even wired devices, of course, are not safe. Someone can plug something like this into your computer and connects it with the keyboard cable on the other side, which is called a keylogger, which does nothing else than recording every keystroke you do on a computer. And actually, these kind of devices are found in editing rooms. So other people are plugging it in. I mean, the easiest way to do that is to bribe the cleaning personnel, right? That cleans up the personnel after everyone has left. It's so easy to just plug it in, plug the next cable in, done. And that happens. There are even ways to get the radiation from a keyboard cable. That's more academic at the moment, but people are working on it to sniff your keyboard. The same is true with the monitor. Monitors can be intercepted from the outside, and so someone can read what you see on your monitor, even if he's in another building or in another room of the building. But of course, other ways of looking at your monitor is also possible, right? I mean, look at these guys. Looks like he's cleaning a window. Is he really cleaning the window, or is he just looking at your monitor to find out what you're doing? Or look at these very high zoom photographs. Digital photography nowadays allows incredible far reach to read monitors or printed documents, as we will see later as well. And sometimes your company even has installed some surveillance cameras just to make sure you do not steal the hardware or whatever. These can be leaked as well because the video signal can be intercepted. Networks, of course, anything that is Wi-Fi or Bluetooth which uses a wireless connection between a device and the computer or the network is a probable interception point, because this network, these radio waves reach far out of your building and can be intercepted. Ethernet as well. Ethernet is available as well if you have access to the wiring. Data storage is a huge problem. As I said, people rely on exchanging data with a USB stick, which was a good idea until maybe 9 months ago, something like that, or maybe a year ago. when someone find out how to manipulate USB sticks that they can infect your computer. So by just plugging in a USB stick into your computer, doing nothing, your computer can get infected with the malware that records keystrokes, that transfers files, that steals your password, whatever. It is known that secret agencies like the GCHQ or the NSA is actually manipulating the firmware on hard disks, the data storage devices in your computers, permanently. You will not detect it. No virus scanner, no malware scanner will ever find that to get access to the data on the storage device from the outside. You have something like firewire cables that can be plugged into your computer, which can be very harmful because they allow access to your computer data without you knowing. Okay, this is not, we can skip that. You have something, if you boot a computer, it's not the operating system that starts first. The first thing that usually starts on a computer is the so-called BIOS, the basic input-output system. And there are ways to infect your BIOS permanently. So before the operating system actually starts and can do any prevention methods, access to your computer can be granted to your adversary. There's one BIOS rootkit called Light Eater, which was very popular with people. And of course, if you store data on your computer in an unencrypted form, everyone who can get access to your computer can read the data on it. That's the easiest way. He does not need your password for Windows, say Windows. He usually can access the data on the device if it's not encrypted. So if you lose a device, that's a problem. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I think there are tens of thousands of laptops lost every year in New York alone in taxis. So people simply forget their laptops in a taxi. And if the data on the device is not encrypted, everyone can read it. And then it's even possible to do a brute force attack on passwords stored on your device, so they can even get access to other services you maybe use online. And of course, they can implant malware, give back the computer, said, oh, I found your computer, here's your computer. But before they did that, they can actually manipulate the data on your storage and to implant malware on it. So computers are a dangerous area. But we have to use them. We have to. So what can we do? First of all, let's evaluate the risks you are under. Not every risk is the same risk for everyone or has the same priority. And some of you may know this is the Homeland Security color scheme for threat assessment. So the very severe things, of course, are the input devices, data storage, and the interface to the network. If you cannot secure these three kinds of hardware components, it's very hard to protect your confidentiality, integrity, and anonymity. The monitor, that's the least problem in most cases. Okay, what can happen if someone gets access to your, let's say, your keystrokes on a computer? Of course, all the passwords you type in will be visible to your adversary. So he can use these passwords to later log in into the computer as a legitimate user, or into your web service, your email account, your PayPal or Amazon account, whatever. You can learn about the credentials you have. You can learn about usernames, machine names, service names, which gives a further attack surface to penetrate your privacy even more. In a network, of course, as well, if you use unencrypted network communications, all transferred passwords are accessible to other people. You probably don't want that. And even the content of your communication, like your email or files you transfer over the network. The storage devices also, the passwords and the keys, even for encrypted devices, and the content of internal files. And this, of course, threatens your confidentiality and integrity. So what can we do? What can you do as a journalist? The first thing is, have you bought the right laptop? Do you use the correct device? What were your criteria for buying your device? Okay, in some cases, your editor says this is, or your publisher says this is the device you have to use. So they give you a laptop, and then you have to live with it. But in most cases, journalists can use their own laptop if they want. So they can make a decision which kind of laptop should they buy. And the point is, it's important for you to do that. But you need to know what are the criteria for selecting the device I want to use to get the maximum security by just buying the right laptop. The point is, you need to buy it anonymously. That sounds funny. Why should you do that? You should do that because the NSA manipulates laptops you buy online and get delivered by a delivery service. They do not do that for every laptop. But if you're a good journalist and if you're on their list, they probably do. Because it's so easy to do. They do it with other hardware as well, Cisco routers, stuff like that. But they do it with laptops as well. It's documented. So you get a device delivered that is actually compromised from the very beginning. No one needs to penetrate your security parameter. It's bad from the very beginning. So how do you do that? What's the criteria to buy the right laptop? I mean, to buy it anonymously is one thing, but what is the right laptop? You need a laptop that is easy to maintain. That means you need something that you can possibly take apart, which means you can do that on basically most devices, let's say ThinkPads, HP, Dell, Acer, Asus, whatever. Not a good idea are MacBooks, because you cannot even take them apart to a level to verify that everything is fine. You need a secure BIOS. You need something that cannot be manipulated. I told you the BIOS is the very first thing that a computer does when it boots. So when your BIOS is compromised, everything else after that has no chance to correct the problem. So you need something that can run a secure BIOS. So how do you do a secure BIOS? If you have a Mac, and I know most journalists have a Mac, and that's the reason why a lot of these examples I will give, these practical examples, are focused on the Mac users. So this is the way to do it. Reboot and press this Apple R, and then go to Utilities, Firmware, Password Utility, and turn on Firmware Password. So at least protect your BIOS settings from being easily manipulating by having no password on it. And if you buy a device, it's usually not set. You have to do that yourself. Other users can, if it's not a MacBook, so let's say if you have a ThinkPad, which is pretty common as well, you can use something, it's called Coreboot, which is a free and open source software, which is audited from a security standpoint, and which prevents easy manipulation. Then you need computers that have no built-in backdoors. That sounds funny, but if you buy a new Intel-based hardware today, it has a built-in backdoor. They don't call it backdoor, they call it active management technology, but it is a backdoor. And only chipsets of Intel until the year 2006 do not have this backdoor. That's the reason why I have such a fucking old hardware. Everyone is laughing at me. But that's the last machine that does not have this backdoor. And all the newer Intels have this active management technology built in, and it is a backdoor. It can connect anyone who can send packets to you over the internet, can get access to your computer data without you knowing. It's not going over the CPU. It's basically inside the chipset that controls internet connection, direct memory access and stuff. So everyone who has a newer laptop is at a potential risk. The only thing is glue your internet connection, glue your Ethernet socket so that no one can plug in the cable. But what's the use of the laptop then, right? Then you should or can do a modification of hardware. That's the reason why you should buy a laptop which is easy to be taken apart. And this procedure is very well documented by the Spiegel, a German newspaper, because their journalists felt the need that they have to know how to use secure hardware. So they made an instruction, a very detailed instruction where nearly everyone, not everyone, but nearly everyone is able to modify an IBM x60, just a machine like mine, to make it secure. Then, of course, you need to select a secure operating system. And I said the best choice is to use some free or open source software for that, like Linux, like Tails, like FreeBSD. It's simply not a good idea to use proprietary systems like Windows or macOS, because you simply do not know what's going on inside. That does not mean that everyone knows what's going on inside Linux, but people have the chance to find out, whereas in the other proprietary systems, people cannot. And then, of course, never leave your hardware out of sight. I mean, I know so many people that, like a journalist in a hotel, they leave their laptop in their room when they go down for breakfast, for example. Bad idea. You shouldn't do that. Manipulating your computer found in a hotel room, and I said how easy it is to get into a hotel room. It takes less than 10 minutes on a normal computer to infect it with malware without you knowing. So if you leave it alone for longer than 10 minutes, you might have a problem. You may have a problem. And check the laptop for irregularities. That's, of course, something very difficult for people who are not computer security experts. But make sure you know someone who can do that at least on a regular basis, let's say every 3 or 6 months. So, depending on your threat, your computer must fulfill certain measures. So if you think you are really that you are really a target to anyone with the necessary technical skills, you should never process documents on a network computer. Never. The technical term for that is air-gapped. Air-gapped means it's not connected to any network. There's always a gap to a network, which only consists of air and not even radio waves. Of course, that is not required by everyone. So there are different levels of what you should do with your hardware depending on your threat level. And I think all these slides and the written text will be available on the Balcon website after this conference. So if I go through fast here, you can read it in detail after the Congress. Okay, now everyone knows if I have a laptop and if I boot it up and if I want to enter my operating system, the first things people usually have to do is to enter a password. I know there are people who have manipulated or configured their operating system that it does not even require a password, right? You just switch it on and then you go. But most people are at least aware they should have a password to log into a computer. But you can do so many things wrong with passwords. It's amazing what people do with passwords. So let's talk about password risk for a moment. Of course, you can lose passwords, you can neglect passwords, you can mishandle passwords. A good example is this image. I don't know how long it was ago when the so-called ISIS hackers hacked the French TV5 website and penetrated the computers there. And I think the TV station was offline for a few hours, actually. The first thing they did when they come back on online was to give a statement. So this guy is from TV5 Monde, talking about what terrible things happened to them. You know what these things are? Passwords. He was standing in front of a wall where people pinned passwords. People were able to read their Twitter account password here. So, lesson learned? Obviously not, right? I mean, people do not realize how careful they must handle passwords. And of course, there's always the social engineering part to reveal passwords as well. Sometimes you are tricked into giving your password away, and you don't even know why. This is a funny story that happened on, I think it was Facebook, right? It said, whenever you type in your Facebook password in a comment, it gets replaced by stars. And 2 or 3 people working together making a story, and the fourth one is the fuck one, right? I mean, because the screwed one, because he tried it out and it didn't work. His password was, I secretly love 50 Cent. And of course, encryption and all these technical stuff does not help in the end. You have to realize that as well. I mean, if someone really wants to get your password, he can. Nobody will say, oh fuck, this is such a safe password and everything is encrypted with such a secure algorithm. We cannot break it even if we buy a $1 million computer. No, that's not the way these people work. They say, buy a $1 wrench and hit him as long that he surrenders his password. That's the way it works. So in the end, you always have to prepare, even if your passwords are good. You can come into a situation where nothing helps. Then, of course, you have the problem, the issues of passwords through security checks. Let's say you have a Yahoo email account and you forgot your password. Things happen, like people forget their password. So there are ways to recover a password by so-called security questions. So this is an example. So here someone lost his password, or lost her password in this case. Said, okay, I have no alternative email address, so the thing is going, give your birthday. The next security question is, where did you meet your spouse? Which had an answer here, Vasila High. And after these 2 questions, it says, okay, welcome back, Sarah. And this Sarah is Sarah Palin, the former governor of Alaska. And of course, it was not her recovering her password, right? It was the people hacking into her email account. So if you rely on such a mechanism, you can get screwed. I mean, a lot of services require at least 2 security questions. And of course, I know it's hard to remember, but let's say you choose as a security question, what's your favorite city and what's your favorite food? And then you say pizza and Rome, but in the reverse order. You said my favorite city is pizza and my favorite food is Rome. Right? At least that gives you some more protection than answer it honestly. These security questions are not meant to be answered honestly, because then someone can find out what it is. What's the name of your pet? What's the first roommate you were with at college or whatever? So these security questions can be a security risk. And of course, people can crack passwords. Sometimes passwords are stored encrypted, but with the right technology, and if you choose a bad password, it's recoverable. So there are special programs to do that, and sometimes there's even special hardware to do it in an even faster way. People are running these hardware to crack passwords. And of course, you can have, as I said before, these keyloggers to catch the keystrokes while you type in passwords. So you can lose a password, even if it's a good one, through this channel. Okay, what are the countermeasures to these password risks and problems? Of course, first you have to recognize bad passwords and you have to choose good passwords. That's the first thing you can do, and it costs you nothing. You can just do it. And then you should store important passwords only in your head or in a physical safe. But people tend to write it down, pin it to walls, as we have seen, right? That's always a bad idea. Every password you write down is a potential security risk. So we will see how to manage that, because nobody can remember hundreds of passwords, good passwords in his head. So we will find a way to do it with just one password. These, for example, are the 25 worst password in 2014. And it's still true, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the most common password used by computer users today. I mean, you look a little bit shocked. Maybe you just found your own password in this list. I don't know. So that is what it is. And if someone tries to break into a password-protected account, these are, of course, the first 25 passwords to try out, because the chance of getting in is pretty high. And you have to understand how people choose their password. They can even do something like this, or password. Password is the second most used password. Crazy. But people are crazy. And a lot of things, you can understand passwords that look complicated by just looking on how they are typed on the keyboard. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is just along on the top row. Or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or the row below. And sometimes you even know if the user is from what region he comes, because this can be either a Z or a Y, or it can be a Q here, depending on the type of keyboard you have. So if you know this person comes from France, for example, this will be, I think, QZ, right? I'm not sure about the French password. Yeah. So you can even know, you can even take it down. Or you can go backwards, and some do this, right? One Q, two, or on a longer row, so they just type this, because it's easy to remember. They remember the movement. I mean, a lot of people nowadays remember phone numbers by just knowing how to move the fingers along this 3x3, 3x4 buttons, right? They do not remember. If they should write it down, they can't. But they can type it, because the movement is in their brain, not the number. So the same happens with passwords. And if you look at a larger number of passwords, not just the 25th best password, but if you look at the 10 million most used passwords in the world, and we know these passwords because big password stores are hacked every day. So you have Adobe hacked, and you have 5 million passwords. So we have a pretty good statistics on how people choose passwords. And we know that most passwords are made up from a stem and an extension. And a stem can be a word, and an extension, for example, can be a number. And most of the extensions are added at the end. It's a suffix to the stem, and only 10% have it as a prefix. A quarter of all passwords are made up from 1,000 stems and 100 extensions, distinct extensions. Which means that it's just 100,000 combinations, right? So that's checked within seconds. And you have a good chance of 25% to crack a password. 2/3 of our passwords are made up from dictionary with letter substitutions. So people just take a dictionary word and replace characters, for example, with numbers. So an E with a 3 or an A with a 4 and stuff. So there are pretty common substitutions for letters. 2/3. Nearly all the rest are made up from keyboard patterns, as we've seen before. If you can find out the pattern on the keyboard. And only what remains, and that's not much, right? Only what remains can actually be called safe. Not good, but safe in a certain way. But how do we remember good passwords? I mean, people think passwords need to be complex. And if they choose a complex password, they have the problem they can't remember it. They have to write it down somewhere. Of course, that's a dilemma. So it makes no sense to choose a complex password if you cannot remember it. You need a way to remember a password. And instead of like this, which is a word with letter substitution and something added which looks complex, but it is not. It is easy to break. It only takes 3 days on a computer to break this password. That's not much. Better just take 4 ordinary words, not related ordinary words from a dictionary. You can easily remember. And this is very hard to save. This would take 550 years at the same speed instead of 3 days. And 550 years is a much longer time than 3 days. So instead of trying to remember how this complex password looked like, you choose something that looks simple but is still much more secure, because the possibilities of combining 4 ordinary words are much more than anything else. And the method I prefer personally is called the Sneyer procedure, and Bruce Sneyer is a very renowned security expert. He said, take a text you can remember easily without writing it down. And use initial letters, number, punctuation marks, and substitutions to create a good password from it. What does that mean? It means you take something like this, which is a child's song, right? I mean, something you probably learned in school, or your mother told you, or whatever. And now you can easily remember it because you've heard it so often or know it very well. And now you go and take the 3, you replace it with the 3. And then you take the first character of each word and keep the punctuation marks. Look at this. This is a fucking good password. And still it's easy to remember because you do not have to remember the password itself, you only have to remember how it's built. But when I say this is the good password, how do I know that? And of course, that's something mathematicians can actually compute. So security is nothing you have to, it's not a feeling. It's something you can actually evaluate and actually find out how it works. Just to go fast through it, so you can actually compute the security of such a password, and that's now cut off. That's a pity. I think it says E is 135, and you see it's between good and very secure. So this is a very good password. If you use such a password in your ordinary work, you're pretty safe. You can be really safe that nobody is able to crack your password. But instead of thinking of how to create secure passwords, in some circumstances it's possible to not use passwords at all. That's even better than using a good password. And that's called two-factor authentication. So you do not have just a password, you also need a device. You need something you have physically to log into your computer. So this can be either something you plug into the USB port, this can be something which has its own display. So this is a number that changes every 60 seconds, and your computer knows what the correct number is for any given time. So you do not have to rely on a password. You can use security measures as well. Of course, you can lose this as well. But without the password, it's nothing worth. So you always need 2 factors to actually pass the authentication process. A lot of web services nowadays switch to these kind of two-factor authentication. So Yahoo is now providing it. So Sarah Palin's webmail account may be safe in the future. Nobody knows if she's using Yahoo Mail anymore. Google does that as well, or offers the possibility to do that as well. But of course, things can go wrong there as well. This is a two-factor authentication step. So where you have to enter your verification code, But the problem is the software was buggy. If you enter /SMS, you get in without knowing the correct, authentication code. So just having the right idea on how to do it does not mean it works, right? You can use one-time pads. This is, for example, my external server, how I log into my external server. So I'm asked for my password, and then I see something like this, and it asked me for a result, and I said 15. The next time I log in, it asked me for a result. Now it's 33. You know what my password is? Hard to tell, right? You need to know that my password basically is not a password, but it's a formula. So I look, if it says 3 times m plus r, I look what value is below the character m. It's 2. 2 times 3 is 6, plus r. R is 9. 6 plus 9 is 15. The next time m is 9, so 3 times 9 is 27. R is 6, 27 plus 6 is 33. But from just looking at the result, even if someone looks me over the shoulder, it's not possible for him to log in the third time, because he simply cannot deduct the formula I'm using. And of course, this is not my real formula. My real formula is a little bit more complex, but I think you get the idea. Okay, handling of passwords is always a problem. You know, people do not use the same brush for every purpose, but people tend to use the same password for every service they use. And the reason, of course, is if you once choose a good password, or what you think is a good password, you tend to reuse it as much as possible. Because remembering good passwords, 100 different good passwords, is really, really impossible. But we tend to do that because if we only have to remember one, that's easy. But if that one is broken, all the services we can log into are broken as well. So my recommendation is to use a password manager. That is a program that manages the passwords for you, and it only asks you for one master password while you start it up. So you have to remember one good password, maybe even with a two-factor authentication, and all the other passwords you use to log into your email account, to log into your Facebook account, into Twitter, whatever, is stored in the password manager. And it's generated there. It's not something you type in, but you let the system generate a password for you, which is really secure, because you do not have to remember it. And that's the easiest way. Of course, there are problems with that as well, because if you lose your master password, or if your master password gets cracked, then you lose every other password as well. That's a drawback. So make sure you use the best password possible. Okay, should we make a little break? What we have to talk about after passwords is, of course, the network connection, because that's a very vital part. If you do not connect your computer to the network, you're much, much safer than if you do. Reality today is that if you plug in a new computer to the internet, regardless where, it takes around 120 seconds before the first person on the internet tries to attack you. The first attack appears around 2 minutes after you plug in a computer. So before you can plug a computer to the network means that you have to think about protection measures of the network. That's the very first thing you have to do. And the easiest way to do that is to use a firewall, a software that is called a firewall. And today, every major operating system has a built-in firewall application, so you can use it. You do not have to download software and install it, it's just there. You only have to know how to activate it, because it's usually switched off by default, which is crazy, but it is. So if you have a Mac, you go to System Preferences, Security and Privacy, Firewall, and then just turn on Firewall. I mean, this is not the only protection you should take, but the first attack will be blocked. because they will just try to SSH into your computer or something like that. So they will try easy ways into your computer, and this firewall usually is able to protect you against such kind of attacks. But of course, if you use the network yourself, you have to take care of making sure that the information you transfer over the network is protected as well, which means you need some kind of encryption on the transport channel. That means on the communication with the server you're talking to. Most people know that Wi-Fi, for example, has some kind of built-in encryption scheme, which is called WEP, VPA or VPA2. So this protects the communication of a computer, of a wireless device with the access point. But you, of course, have to realize that this is only true for the air cable. So it only protects the data over the air from your computer to the access point. Afterwards, it's unencrypted as well. So it's not protected anymore. It just prevents people from sniffing your Wi-Fi signal and reading it in clear text. But it does not prevent the transport of the data over the internet. An encryption method most people know about is especially for websites. So if you go into a browser and type in not HTTP but HTTPS, and you see some kind of logs, usually that's the usual symbol or a green bar or whatever, then you have encryption of the connection to the server. So the data transferred between your computer and the server is encrypted. So nobody else except these two peers, you yourself, and the server can read the data. Everyone else that is just transporting data cannot read it. And I'm not sure if any one of you heard the talk this morning about the Serbian internet. So you probably have learned how data packets travel if you, for example, go to Facebook or something like that, through how many jurisdictions these packets go and how many people are involved and companies are involved that actually store data and read your data. The same is true, of course, that you can use these protection measures for other web services as well, especially email. So if you have an email account somewhere, it's not a good idea to read the email in clear text, but to communicate with the mail server over an encrypted service as well. I thought I had a slide for that. No, I didn't. Okay, and the other thing is, of course, that you can use so-called private virtual networks, VPNs, which allow you to communicate with the internet over an encrypted channel and additionally give you some kind of anonymity. Because even if you encrypt data on the internet, it's still known who is communicating with whom. So they know it's your computer talking to this web server. Even if the connection is encrypted, they cannot read the content, but they know you are talking to this web server. And the VPN can provide protection against that on an additional level. So how does VPN work? In the normal case, your computer connects through the internet to different web servers directly. And this connection can be seen by anyone on the internet. And a VPN means that you connect through a VPN server, and the VPN server connects to the web servers on your behalf. So you're not directly connecting to the web servers, but through the VPN server. So anyone observing this connection will only see that the web server is connecting with the VPN server, but they cannot trace that back to you. So that additionally, it's not only encrypting the communication, but also give you a certain level of anonymity. Important, of course, because most of these VPN servers are not for free. You usually have to pay for them. It's important to choose a VPN service that allows you to buy its service anonymously. So there's one group called the Copymists. Anyone ever heard of the Copymists? Okay, wonderful. They, for example, accept bitcoins for the VPN service. Others allow you to use so-called gift cards. You usually can go to a shop and see gift cards for iTunes and Amazon and quite a few different services. So you can buy your VPN service with these gift cards, which is a very anonymous way, because you can pay these in cash at a counter, then just give in the code printed on the gift card, and they give you not free, but they give you a VPN service. So that's completely anonymously. So even if the VPN operator is requested to log all the traffic, which they usually are, depending on the legislation or the jurisdiction they are in, they don't really need to know who you are. So they can say, okay, we have these logs, but we do not know what is the person, what's the name of the person, or what is the identity behind this account. They do not have that. Then, of course, you can try to obfuscate how you communicate. And obfuscation usually is not a good security measure. That's what people say. But in some cases, it can work pretty well. And in a way, Tor is an obfuscation, because it obfuscates who is communicating with whom much more efficiently than the VPN server. In the case of the VPN server, you have to believe the operator of the VPN server that he does not give away any contact details if you have to register and cannot buy it anonymously. In case of Tor, it's not possible for any Tor operator to reveal your identity when you use the service. So even Tor does not know who is communicating with whom. So there are no information to be given away to other people, especially agencies or police or whatever. Just a short explanation how Tor works. Let's say Alice wants to communicate with the server, with Bob's server, and there is the internet in between, and some of the computers on the internet are Tor nodes. These are the computers with the little green plus sign in them. So the first thing that Alice does is to find a list of all these Tor nodes on the internet. And currently we have around 5,000, something like 5,500 Tor nodes worldwide. And they are registered on 9 different computer directory servers. So you can ask how many, or where are Tor nodes on this world. So the first step is that Alice asks for this list of Tor nodes available. And then Alice chooses 3 random nodes from the Tor network to build a so-called circuit. So Alice chooses these 3 computers and talks to the first. And talks to the first means that the first computer knows the identity of Alice, because it knows the IP address of Alice, because it can see the IP address, otherwise communication would not be possible. Then this entry node is used as a relay to relay the traffic from Alice to the next node. The next node does not know Alice anymore. It only knows the entry node which was talking to. And the last node, the exit node, knows how to reach Bob. But it does not even know who Alice is, or it doesn't know the guard node. It only knows the anonymizing middle node. And of course there is heavy encryption involved. I do not want to explain all this technical stuff in detail, but I think you get an idea that Alice is communicating with Bob through this chain of servers which are providing the anonymity. And if Alice wants to talk to a different computer, it chooses a new path. So it's not reusing the circuit for every connection. It's building a new circuit for every connection to a server. So Tor is at the moment the best way to obfuscate your communication on the internet. This map shows a map of the world, not based on its geographical properties, but on the number of Tor users that on a daily basis use Tor. That's the reason why this is Africa, which is basically nothing, right? So you have a lot of people using it here. This is France, this is Germany, this is Italy, this is Spain. This is the US, Canada. So you see that in many countries, Tor is used where you would say, why do people use Tor? Because, I mean, they are not obviously living in a very oppressive government. I mean, some do, but we would call it Western standard, right? But very few are using it in countries where you would really suspect that it's needed, like. Even in these countries like Turkey, you normally only have very few users. I think this has 30,000 users. So in Turkey, the normal user base is 30,000. But you see this peak? This is the peak when Erdogan switched off Twitter. So when he blocked access to Twitter based on because he didn't like comments going on Twitter about his government. So people start switching to Tor because that provides them access to information the government otherwise would censor by censoring the DNS records. Okay, obfuscation, as I said, can also be applied on other levels. I mean, you have to know that every hardware device that connects you to the internet has a very unique ID, which is called the so-called MAC address. May it be a USB Wi-Fi dongle, may it be an Ethernet card, every device that connects to the internet has a unique ID. And that does not change. It's built in to the device. So if you have a laptop and you move around, whenever you connect to a Wi-Fi hotspot, they can identify you because you are doing that with the same MAC address. So your computer is visible as the same computer that had been using the Wi-Fi somewhere else, for example. So to obfuscate this address is a really good idea, and a lot of operating systems actually do allow that quite easily. So you can change the MAC address of your device because it's usually built into the hardware, but the software driving the IP stack can nonetheless modify the MAC address. It's because it's just software. So you should use something like a MAC address changer if you connect to Wi-Fi's in different spots, so that nobody knows that you're using that it's you that is using the Wi-Fi. The other thing is, I said, it's very important that your data on the data storage is protected. And one way to do that is to, of course, encrypt your data. And you have two choices usually to do that. You can encrypt single files, but that's very tedious because then you have to remember which files are encrypted. If you want to work with them, you have to decrypt them when you open them. That can be very hard to do and very tedious. So you can use programs like TrueCrypt. It was TrueCrypt before, now it's VeraCrypt, that allows you to create an encrypted volume on your computer hard disk, which means you create a huge file, and then you can use this file as an encrypted container for other files. And that behaves like a plugged-in USB stick, for example. So you can use it like a drive, which is very easy. You just have to unlock the encrypted computer once, the encrypted container once, and then store and retrieve data from it as if it is a plugged-in USB stick, for example. And you can even hide encrypted volumes in encrypted volumes in encrypted volumes. That's like this Russian Matryoshka scheme, so you can have even further levels of protection. Because if someone, as I said before, comes to you and beats you up because he wants to access your encrypted data, maybe you should have an encrypted container that contains very unsuspicious files, nothing important, And inside the encrypted container, you have a hidden encrypted container where your real important data lies. And you can speculate they do not know that and do not find it. So you surrender your password, they can access everything, but your real data is still protected. But does that work? I mean, of course, it may work if you encounter a border policeman that is not very technical, right? I mean, maybe he can know, okay, you have something encrypted on your computer and forces you to decrypt it. But whenever you have some tech-savvy person in front of you, he probably knows that you can have hidden containers in it. So they beat you up to give you the access to the next level and to the next level. And even if there is no next level, they beat you up, right? So this kind of obfuscation can actually be a problem in the end. And there's one very interesting program that did some similar scheme. It was called Rubber Hose. It was meant to be a tool for especially Chinese dissidents to hide data. So it created some kind, or it thought it created some kind of plausible deniability. So you can say, okay, my hard drive is encrypted, so I give you the password so you can decrypt it. But there was a hidden encryption on it as well, where the real data was stored. And they found out it does not work. As soon as the authorities learn about this scheme, they beat people up to surrender the next level of access, right? So the programmers stopped this development. That was in the early 90s. And the name of the developer was Julian Assange, by the way. Another thing is, of course, that you have to think about your data not only when it's there, you also have to think about the data you delete. I mean, what do you do if you want to delete data? So you usually drag it to a trash bin, right, and say, then it's gone. No, it's not. Erasing the data on the hard disk itself is such time-consuming process that most operating systems don't do that. They just delete the reference to the data on the disk. And eventually it gets overwritten by new data, but until then the data is still there. So if you have some really sensitive information stored on your disk and you want to delete it, you have to make sure it's really deleted, which means it's overwritten by something unsuspicious, like it's zeroed out, for example. So on the Mac OS, if you do that, if you put things into the trash bin, make sure you choose the following method: that you click on the trash icon, go to the Finder in the top menu, and set Secure Empty Trash. So that you just not only delete the trash, but that you securely delete it. And if you choose this method, then the data is really gone. It's no longer on your hard disk. You cannot find it anymore. The same thing, of course, you can do with a USB stick. I mean, let's say you have a USB stick with data on it and you want to get rid of everything of that. It's not enough to just say delete all the files. You have to securely delete it. And this is the way to do it on the Mac OS. The same with free space on the hard disk. So it's in Mac OS, it's all built in. It's pretty easy to use, and you should do that. On Windows and on Linux, you have to use special programs. I recommend a program called BleachBit, which is an open source software which can delete all the information securely, so it's really wiped out. It's no longer on the hard disk. Okay. Now we have basically the hardware is, I've talked enough about hardware. Let's talk about software. What you see here is the statistics of software vulnerabilities per year. I mean, the first thing you see, the trend is definitely up, right? I mean, there are up and downs, but the trend in general is up. And this year, I mean, this is from beginning of April, so this will go up till the end of the year as well. So the general trend is going up. And this means around 8,000 software vulnerabilities in software you use every day, which can be exploited by persons or by people to implant malware on your computer, to access your data, to sniff your passwords, stuff like that. And I think we can, just to mention it, there are so-called zero-day exploits. These are security vulnerabilities nobody knows. I mean, these unknown security vulnerabilities do not even show up in the statistics. If you do not know about a security vulnerability, you cannot count it, right? And the point is that in most cases, at least one person knows about it. And in many cases, more than one people know about it. And there is even a market for it. There are companies like Wupen or Netragard that buy and sell zero-day exploits. Because if you want to compromise a computer of a target, the easiest way to do that is to use a software exploit nobody knows about, because then the person cannot protect against it. And if you know such zero-day exploits, it's very easy to do that. So if you know a zero-day exploit, let's say in Acrobat Reader or in the Flash player, you can do something on other person's computer without them even realizing it. And believe me, these zero-day exploits, if you sell them or buy them, are not cheap. I mean, this, of course, is not a fake scene. This is a real bag full of money. That's what they pay for one single zero-day exploit. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes?
Many of us are thinking like, I'm not that valuable, so no government would use zero-day exploit for me. So I'm kind of sad, right?
What country are you from?
I'm from Serbia, yeah. Sorry.
You think your government will not buy
I
zero-day
actually think,
exploits?
yeah, I know my
because
government.
You do not have enough
I
money,
work
or
with
what's the
government.
problem?
I know how tech-savvy they are, and they are not, and I know they're cryptographers.
Yeah.
I also know, I happen to know, this is a really small country, you have to understand, it's like only 7 million people. So it's not about my government, I'm just talking about many of us, activists worldwide, are thinking like, I'm not that valuable that my government or any other government would use so expensive all-day, zero-day exploits on me. And how you deal with that argument? Because it's like, all of us are thinking like, oh, no, I'm not that important. I'm not member of parliament. I'm not leading a worldwide revolution. I'm just an activist or a journalist, for that matter.
But the zero-day exploit is not like an atomic bomb. I mean, you can buy an atomic bomb very expensively, but you can only use it once, right?
Right.
And zero-day exploit, you can use it until someone finds out that it is a zero-day exploit. So it's not about using you as a target specifically, but if they have something where they have a zero-day exploit, and let's say $200,000 is not expensive, not even for Serbian government or secret agencies, and they can use it on, let's say, 50,000 different targets.
Right,
That's
they can do it for years. Yeah, I never thought about it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or to the, can I just reference to your comment is that you're thinking maybe a little bit different than I had the experience that you're not important to your government or to any third part, but as a journalist or as an activist, you also have a responsibility to people you are in contact with. So maybe you're not interested, but interesting to government or something. But
okay, as I said, there is a market for it. There are people making good money from finding zero-day exploits and selling them to other companies that sell them to governments and secret agencies, especially. I mean, no company usually buys zero-day exploits. It's really usually the government and agencies that do that. And of course, they have a limited lifetime. One day, someone will find this security problem as an academic researcher or whatever, and will publish it, and of course, then it's gone. Then the company will fix it. But as you can see here, I mean, there is a time span where computers are vulnerable, and they use it. I mean, I do not know a single government that does not buy zero-day exploits. But sometimes they don't even have to buy zero-day exploits to compromise your computer, because people behave funny when they use their computer. I mean, you usually, there's always some funny kind of piece of software you want to install, right? Or you have a problem and look, what kind of software can I use to solve my problem? And sometimes you create your problem by trying to solve your problem. Because what usually happens is that you do an internet search for a solution. You say, I want to do this and this. What program can I use to do it? Then you download it from whatever link is provided in the search answer. Then you install the software without any further checks. Well, and that's it, right? I mean, at that very moment, your computer is compromised. And nobody did that from the outside. You did it yourself. This is, of course, a real problem, because what can we do to find out if software is good, if software is compromised? How can a usual end user actually do that? And the point is, nobody can. There are two common ways to do that. The first is the so-called certificate-based approach, which means software gets signed by the issuer, by the company who developed the software, so you can prove that the software you're downloading and installing actually is actually the official software released by that company. And if you trust the company, you can trust the software. I mean, if you install software on Windows, you probably have seen that little box that says this company or this software was released by this and this company. Should I continue to trust the company? And you usually say yes. Most people say yes, even if it says, I cannot find out what is the source of the software, but at least it shows you something. The problem is there are so many fake and untrustworthy certificates around in the world, it's unbelievable. Because people, for whatever reason, because by exploiting the process of registering a certificate, can register certificates for companies they do not own. I mean, there are many people who have Microsoft certificates, right? Or Google certificates. So they can create malware, sign it with that key, and if you try to install it, it would say this software is coming from Google. Do you trust Google? And people say, yeah, sure I do, right? So this is not a good mechanism for the software installation process, because you cannot make sure, is this certificate really from the company I want to trust? The other thing is, and that's the most usual thing, is the so-called signature-based approach. So you download software, and it says, okay, you can do a checksum of the downloaded file and compare it with our value, and if this value is correct, you can trust the software. Of course, that's a problem. If you assume that someone manipulated software on a legitimate site, he can also manipulate the checksum on the website. So checking the checksum from the same website makes no sense, but that's what usually happens. You have a download button, and you can have the checksum next to it. That does not make sense. Normally, or the verification for software package should be the task of the IT department. I know that most people don't like the IT department. So if you're a journalist and say, I need this kind of software, and it takes weeks or months, or they say no, you can't, or whatever. So you try to install it yourself. But be aware, if you circumvent this process, you can be in more trouble than you want to. So it should be the task of the IT department to evaluate and audit the software that could be installed on computers and do the internal procurement. And of course, it's your obligation to keep your operating system up to date. The update process is maybe annoying, but usually companies only do updates if there is a real problem with the software. And it can be just a bug that prevents it from functioning correct, but most of the software updates are actually security updates, because these exploits I talked about before pop up every day. I mean, if you have 8,000 vulnerabilities in 1 year, means that every day is popping up at least 25, if I'm correct in my calculation, right? 25, something like that. So people have to fix software all the time, and you have to install the new software on your computer, otherwise you will still be vulnerable. And it's always a good idea to install a virus scanner as well. But of course the virus scanner has the same problem. It can only find viruses it knows about. That's like with the other exploits as well. If you have a virus that is not known by the virus scanner company, the virus scanner will not detect it. So it can only detect what is known. It even gets worse with the smartphone. I mean, on the computer there's sometimes barriers where you simply cannot install new software because you do not have administrative rights. Especially in an environment like the editing room where you use a computer which is installed by the IT department, you can use it, you have an account to use it, but you cannot install certain software on it because it would require administrative rights and you don't have that. On the smartphone, you are the owner, you are the administrator, you are the person with the highest privilege to do anything with the smartphone. And people do that. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. You know, there are a lot of applications which can be used as a flashlight for your smartphone, so which is a nice thing if you're out in the dark and you just switch on the flashlight so to find your way through the darkness. That's good. But during the installation, these applications ask for privileges to do all fucking kind of things, like reading your personal information, reading your contacts, making phone calls. So you see here, these are the 10 most popular flashlight applications on Android. And these are the permissions they request and are granted by their users. I mean, the only permission the flashlight application really needs is to access the camera flashlight. It does not need anything else to function. But it's nonetheless requesting all these other permissions. And that's not by chance. It's not the stupidity of the programmer to ask for all these permissions. They are getting this permission because the software product is free. And if something is free, you are the product. Hardware can be lost or stolen, especially for a smartphone. You can lose a smartphone much more easily than you can lose a laptop. I mean, a laptop is much bigger, so you will probably notice much earlier. And most of these hardware, especially as the Android, is that really protected? I mean, if you lose your smartphone, can someone access the data on it? It's pretty easy. I mean, most of the people use these patterns to log in because it's fast. You just draw a pattern, right, and you log in. But the point is, your finger has always a little fat on it. So this fat is actually visible on the screen, and if you look at the right angle, you can easily see what the pattern is. So people can just take the smartphone, look at it in the right angle, and see your pattern by luck. Especially if you look on these unlock patterns people use, we can do the same statistic as we did with passwords. It's pretty funny. Over 75% of all patterns start in a corner. And I don't ask you if you have an Android and are using a pattern, what your pattern is. Just tell me if you fall in this category, right? Yeah. Over 50% of these start in the top left corner. The average number of nodes is 5. The average direction of the pattern is from top left to bottom right, the general direction. Most women do not use crossing lines. 10% use a letter, usually the first letter of a name, might be the spouse or the child or the pet or whatever. So they try to draw a letter as a login pattern. And if you know all these, of course, the access to a lost smartphone is pretty easy. It reduces the number of possible patterns dramatically. So you do not need a lot of choices to find out what the pattern really is. The loss of data, of course, or the loss of the smartphone can mean the loss of the data. That means all your contacts, your schedules. I mean, imagine you're a journalist and have your sources in your contact list. I mean, crazy. I mean, you're revealing the identity of your sources, your contacts. But smartphones, of course, are not just computers, or they, of course, have this radio communication to do the task of phoning, of doing phone calls, right? So often enough, a smartphone connects to a cell which is rogue, which is not the official operator of the network. It's very easy to set up so-called IMSI caches, and it's done to find out, to access your communication, to find out whom you're dialing to, what you are talking to, even the content of the communication. And most of these normal smartphones do not detect this. This is a screen image from my crypto phone, which has a baseband firewall to actually find out if something like that happens. And this happens pretty often. This year was different. I didn't arrive in Belgrade. I arrived last year in Belgrade, and the whole thing said network confidentiality 0, because it only saw rogue network connections. So it said no network is possible here. But the normal users will not find that out. So there are do-it-yourself things to build. So you can even build your own IMSI catcher for less than 1,500 euros if you are technically skilled. So these things are used by police and agencies all the time. I remember a story. I was in London in the Ecuadorian embassy, so someone came in and said, "Look what I just got on my cell phone." It was a roaming SMS, and so if you switch networks, you usually get a roaming SMS from the new operator to tell you're now logged into the new network and what the rates are and stuff. And we were in London, so moving around from Harrods to the Ecuadorian embassy does not really switch the operator. It's still the same operator, but he got a roaming message. And this roaming message said, "Welcome to Uganda Telecom." Because the police vans in front of the embassy, where Julian Assange is arrested since more or less 3 years, they of course have IMSI catchers all the time to catch up all cell phone communications from within the embassy and from around the embassy. And our guess is they used an equipment they had in use in Uganda before and brought it to London and just forgot to reconfigure it. So people found out. Otherwise, if they would have configured correctly, no one would have known they were on an IMSI catcher. So what identifies your phone are two distinct informations. The one is the so-called IMEI. The IMEI is an identifier for the hardware of your phone. So it's linked to your phone, your unique phone. And to operate the phone, of course, you also need this kind of card, the SIM card. And the SIM card has its own identifier. And if you put a SIM card into the phone, these two informations are transmitted to the cell you're talking to the network you're talking to. So let's say you say, I want to hide my identity by putting in a new SIM card into my phone. Does not help, because you do not change the IMEI. That's still the same thing. And it's transferred to the operator, and they of course store that information. They knew it's still your phone. You're just using a new SIM card, so you have not obfuscated your identity. If you really need to make a phone call and that is not linked to you, that you only have one chance, you need to buy a new phone, probably an old phone. You get that very cheap nowadays. I mean, because people sell their old phones all the time, so they are happy to give it away for very, very less, for very cheap. And there are ways to buy anonymous SIM cards. I'm not sure of the situation here in Serbia, but I think you can go just to a shop and ask for a SIM card and they give it to you, right? I think I have a Telenor card that was not registered on my name pretty easily. But you have to do it both. You have to switch phone and you have to switch the SIM card. So that's just what I said. So if you want to make sure you're protected, you need to buy new things. It's always a good idea to turn off a device if you do not need it. I mean, of course, if you switch off a phone, you will not be reachable. I mean, you probably do not want to make a call, but no one can call you as well. That can be a problem. But the other advice is much more important. Never use an anonymous phone together with another cell phone. I mean, people say, okay, I have an anonymous phone, it's not registered on my name, I bought it cheap on the market, but I have a regular phone as well, and they are carrying it around all the same, right? So the metadata that is collected, I mean, whenever a cell phone logs into the network, into different base stations, this move is recorded, of course. So they simply can find out if these two phones move all the time in the same cells, and then they know they belong to the same person, basically, right? So you have nothing, you gained nothing. If you want to use anonymous cell phone communication, you should not use them at the same time. Definitely.
You say we should turn off the device, but there is a lot of information that device, when turned off, also can be tracked. Or do you have some another information for a half hour and so on after you switch
What do you
off?
mean with tracked?
Tracked also.
I mean, of course, this new phone is tracked as well, but it's not linked to your identity.
Yes.
So they know this cell phone is around, they knew how the cell phone is moving, but they cannot easily link it to your identity. Before 2001, most of the cell phones were able, with the software, to change the IMEI. That has been changed since 2001. And there are very few phones that can do this IMEI change with software nowadays. I have a crypto phone, which is a special encrypted smartphone, which allows which changes IMEI every time it's booted. I can easily put a new SIM card in it, and when I switch it on, it has a new IMEI, and the connection is lost.
Excuse me, it's just one question. You actually answered my unasked question about a software which can rewrite the firmware or IMEI. My another question would be, is it legal?
Who fucking cares?
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it's a real question, so I should probably answer it a little bit more honestly. I mean, there are countries where it is illegal, there are countries where it's not illegal. I do not know the situation in Serbia. It is illegal? Illegal. Okay. In Germany, it's a gray zone. Nobody has ever been charged for changing the IMEI. Yeah, it's probably illegal in Germany as well, but nobody has ever been charged. Yeah. No, the UK is actually, I think there are countries, I think like the US and the UK, which handle it a little bit different. I mean, other countries, I mean, it depends on the country. But it's certainly not so illegal that the phone I'm using from that is a German company. I mean, it's a feature of the phone. They offer it, and if it would be illegal, they would not be able to sell it. So it's not that illegal, at least, right? I mean, probably they say it will not be used in Germany or whatever, I don't know.
Is any phone company offering so far that kind of software pre-installed? Is any company offering it so far?
It's a hardware thing. So So the phone I have is the usual Samsung S3, but it's branded by a company called GSMK, which does cryptophones. So that's all the communication on the phone is basically encrypted. But you only can talk to another cryptophone. It's not to talk to other phones.
Right, yeah.
And their firmware actually manages the baseband processor, which changes the MA of the device, and they sell it officially. So
Yeah,
you can buy it. It's just terribly expensive.
Really? How much it is?
I think you can only buy two, which makes sense because you cannot talk to anyone without it. And I think a pair costs around 3,000 euros or something like that.
Oh, right. I heard that there is some application which is developed by one of the editors of 2600. And it's called, I have to go to my Facebook and see, like Secure Call, whatever. And it's developed by one of the biggest American telecom providers, or mobile telecommunications operator. So it's within the research and development department, and it's been sold to Europeans as well. I haven't tested it so far, but we can stay in touch for that.
The other way is to buy a smartphone that was built before 2001. And that's probably the cheapest, easiest way. Sometimes you do not get this data cable for these old mobile phones. So you get the mobile phone, but you do not get the cable to connect to the phone to actually do this change of the MA. Sometimes because they have only a serial adapter, and now computers don't have serial ports anymore and stuff like that. But that's probably the easiest, cheapest way to do it, because a lot of the old hardware actually allowed to change the MA.
Titan, and I changed email on that phone model. That's newer model, maybe 2005, 2004. I'm not sure.
Okay. Exactly. I forgot that a lot of Chinese manufactured smartphones actually allow the change of MA because they have to. They're delivering it with all zeros in the MA, and you cannot use that phone because, of course, the network operator will know if two phones with the same MA pop up, the second one will be blocked. So you need to change the MA. So if you have a Chinese manufactured smartphone, it's pretty likely you can change the MA. The problem is reading the manual, right? Most phones today offer one more level of protection, and that is the encryption of the data you store on your phone. If you use Android, make sure you encrypt your phone. So if you lose it, even if someone finds it, no one will be able to access it. But here, of course, the same thing, you need to have a good passphrase. If you just type in a 4-digit PIN number or something like that, that's easy to try out and to get access. So you need some good passphrase here as well, which is annoying because typing in a long passphrase on a phone is always a little bit tedious. Okay. Next section is paper. I love this section because paper is still something, especially journalists use a lot. And I usually hear, we are safe, we do not use computers, we do everything on paper. But the days where papers were safe are long gone. You see this guy, picture was actually taken in front of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And he's carrying a clipboard with him, and the digital cameras today have such a high resolution that it's pretty easy, even from far away, to take the photo and zoom in onto the written information. And this said how to handle Julian Assange if he should ever leave the embassy, and what procedures should be taken and stuff like that, and how to get him out, right? I think this poor guy lost his job. He was not the only one in Britain to lose his job because of being photographed with important papers in his hand. So if you carry papers around, make sure you have a cover on top of it and not carry it in the open. So you can use paper, but make sure you cover it. Then people think, okay, if I want to get rid of papers, I just shredder them. I mean, put them into the shredder. It's better than putting them into the trash bin as a whole, that's for sure. But it's not safe. Actually, there are companies, this is just one example, called Unshredder, which take a whole bunch of these shredded documents, put them onto a scanner, and use software to reassemble the documents. And it works pretty fast, pretty reliable. The scanners are not cheap because they need to make sure that the fragments don't overlap, so that they are on the scanner, that they do not overlap. But that's the only thing. Once they are scanned in, it's pretty easy to reassemble that. You need it very, very fine-grained. Better to burn paper if you want to really get rid of it instead of shredding it. Other things people do is maybe they want to release a document, but they want not to release the every word or every piece of the document. So they use something to black it out, which can be a problem in itself. So sometimes you just put the blackened doc. If you have the original, you just put the blackened document in front of a window, have the sunshine from behind, and you can read it through the ink. But if you have something like a copy of a blackened document, of course, that will not work anymore. But nonetheless, people were interested what this word was. And it was pretty easy to find out. What they did was the following. They found out what is the font of the document. What is the font the document was printed in? What is the width of the blackened area? And then they said, okay, if we run a dictionary, and it must be some English text, I mean, it would make no sense that the word blackened out is not English, right? So they run an English dictionary on it and said, in this font, this size, how many possible hits with the, of course, variant? I mean, you have to allow small margins of error. So it runs through all the possible English words and said, it's one of 1530. That's not many words. I mean, English is quite a large language. It has a lot of words. So if you have only 1500, that's not much. But you can even go further. You can say, it must begin with a vocal. Why? Because there is an N in front of it at the end of the A, right? So it must start with a vocal. So that reduces the number of possible hits to 346. Then you can say, okay, now we can look through all the 346, that's not so much, and find which words make sense in the context of the document. And suddenly there were only 7. And then they said, okay, we can even try to reduce it to the number of verifiable contexts. So what would make in this whole context really sense? And suddenly it was only 3. And it said it's either Ukrainian, Ugandan or Egyptian. So it was pretty easy to find out it was Egyptian. I mean, they were talking about Egypt here all the time, so it makes sense. Nobody knows why they blackened it out at all. But it was easy to, nonetheless, it was easy to find out what this word really was. Okay, I think we should skip the web browser, because that's something they will talk to you in the crypto party anyway. Okay, so I've actually skipped a part. I skipped the part that talks about browsing the web securely and how to use email securely, because that's something you could actually learn at the crypto party, which is going on here all the time. So I think it's more important to talk something which is more related to the journalistic work as well, and something that is not so deeply handled in a crypto party usually, because it has nothing to do with encryption. And the thing I want to talk about is not just paper again, although this looks like a piece of paper, but it is a PDF document. I want to talk about what we call metadata. Metadata is something that is attached to electronic documents in this case, which is not visible to the naked eye. I mean, if you have a PDF file, which can be, let's say, 1.5 megabyte in size, there's a program that renders this document, this data, and displays something on the screen. But of course, in this document, there's much more information than what you can see on the screen. And that's the metadata, the data you do not see. And sometimes it happens that the process of visualizing data is not what the data really reveals or can reveal. So this is an example of a PDF document from the British Army, from the British Navy, which talked about their atomic submarines. I think it's Trident or something like that, I don't know exactly. So they were forced to release documents, but said, okay, not every part of the document can be released, so they said we have to blacken out parts of the document. Because this is electronically, they of course couldn't use ink on a paper to blacken it out, so they had to do it electronically. So they said to some secretary or whatever, this is the PDF document, this is the part nobody should see, produce a PDF where you cannot see it. And the person did, as you see, right? This is the rendered PDF document. The point is, he did not delete any text. He just set the font color and the background color to black. Which means if you use a mouse and select the text, it's there. It was not visible in the PDF document, but it was there. And of course that raised a big fuss in the UK. How stupid can someone be to do that? But these things happen actually more often than you think. I mean, this is just one case of many I know, where people did exactly that. Blacken it out by setting the background color and the font color to the same color. The other thing is that metadata appears not only in PDF documents, they of course appear as well in pictures. So just as an example, there was a Pakistani journalist interviewing Osama bin Laden. I should change the slides probably to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to make it more current, right? But I think you get the point. Of course, if you're a journalist and you make an interview with someone who do not want to be catched, you must make sure you do not reveal the location of the interview without just by your error, by your mistake, right? So, of course, there was a photograph taken. And cameras today now do not only store the image data, they usually have GPS, they have Wi-Fi, they have all kinds of devices built in. And information about that is actually added to the image data. That's metadata for the image. I mean, that could make sense. I mean, imagine you're a photojournalist doing a lot of images, so you can later find out at what time did you take the picture, at what location. So it could make sense under certain circumstances, but it would be a terrible mistake to do it if you do such an interview. So the information where the picture was taken was included, and it was possible. So you can see it was on the outskirts of Kabul at that time in Afghanistan. But because this information is stored electronically along with the image, and like you could use Photoshop to manipulate the image, of course you can use software to manipulate. You can use software to manipulate the metadata as well. So maybe it's not a good idea to get rid of the metadata, because that could look suspicious, right? If you remove it, but of course you can change it. So you can just change the geo coordinates within the image to another place, and suddenly this interview would not have taken place in the outskirts of Kabul, but in the White House. Yes. So be aware that metadata is something that is attached to basically all electronic documents you process on your computer. It's either be photos, be images, videos, be documents, written text documents, whatever. Every document contains metadata. And if you are, as a journalist, work with documents and give them away to other people, you should make sure that this metadata is either removed or obfuscated, depending on what you think is the best in your situation. Sometimes even governments do not realize what they do. You probably remember the Gaza flotilla, which in May 2010 tried to reach the Gaza Strip from Turkey to deliver concrete and humanitarian stuff to the Gaza Strip, and was brought up by the Israeli army, navy, basically. So they brought them up here in the Mediterranean, and of course to justify their action, they published material on what they found on the boats of the flotilla, just to make sure that everyone understands that they were carrying weapons as well and not just humanitarian goods and stuff. So they released photos like this with bulletproof jackets and stuff, so which are not humanitarian in a way, but of course you could argue they are humanitarian because they save lives, right, in a fire, but they used it as an argument that the material of the Gaza flotilla was not just delivering humanitarian goods. The problem was they forgot to remove the metadata. And the metadata showed the image was taken some 4 years before the event. So, but now you as a journalist, of course, have to think, well, did they make a mistake or did someone else fake the metadata to make you think they made a mistake? So metadata is a really troublesome thing. You can believe it, or you can say maybe it's manipulated because it's so easy to change, right? It's not, you cannot see it from the metadata itself, if it's correct or not. It's just a random bunch of bits, right? That's all. Everyone can change it. But in this case, I think the person releasing it lost the job, so which is a good indication that it was a real mistake. So if you have documents you want to share with other people, you should always, really always remove the metadata before you give them away. Because this metadata is usually not necessary for the receiving party. It usually makes no sense for the other person to have this metadata as well. It's for you to organize your documents, that's fine. But if you give it away, make sure you remove it. And there are tools to do that. This is just an example. It's called Metadata Anonymization Toolkit, MAT. So it's so easy to use. You just click on a file name, like a PDF. You can see what metadata is in there, and then you go to Screw, and then you remove the metadata from that document. So it writes you a new document with an extension or with a suffix underscores clean, so you know this is the clean document, and then you can use that document to give it away to another person. And then you can be sure that no metadata except the things you really need to see in the document itself is transmitted. This, of course, is available on different platforms. I think this is the one for the macOS, if I'm correct. Yes, this is the thing for the macOS. So you can have that for all different kinds of formats. You can do that for images, for PDFs, for videos, for MP3s, whatever. So it safely removes the information from the documents. And the last thing I want to tell you, although this is also a part of the crypto party, a lot of the tools and countermeasures we talked about today are very hard to implement if you have to do that on your normal operating system. Most things are possible, but usually you have to install software, you have to learn how to use it. You have to make sure that everything fits together, because the weakest link is always the possibility you do something wrong, and you may do 99% correct, and then 1% you fail, and then everything fails. So the easiest way to work with your computer, if you work with sensitive documents, this is the way WikiLeaks, for example, uses all its computers, is to use an operating system called Tails. You do not have to install that on your computer, that's important. You can run it from a DVD or from a USB stick. And it makes sure that you, for example, cannot reveal your identity on the internet. Even if you try, you can't, right? Normally it's hard to get it right that your identity is protected on the internet, but you have to take a lot of countermeasures and you have to know how your browser works and how your operating system works. In this case, it's hard to circumvent the protection. So this is a very, very good tool to work with sensitive documents. As I said, if you join the crypto party, they will happily produce you or create you a Tails image. It's free. You do not have to pay for it. It works on any USB stick with at least 4 gigabytes of capacity. And if you have one, you can share it with your friends and colleagues, because you can, if you start it up, there's a button to clone it to a new USB stick. So you have 2, and then you can spread it. It's pretty easy to use. It has all the tools we were talking about, or not talking about, like email protection, web protection, metadata removal, all that stuff you would like to have. And the best thing is that your computer you're using it on is not touched. You can use it on any computer you like. The point is, you buy a computer and install the fucking Windows on it. And do something with it that it looks like a used computer. And that's the thing you carry around with you if you go to another country. So if you go to the border and they say, turn on your computer, you can turn on your computer, no problem. And it behaves like a real computer really in use. But there's no sensitive document in it. And if you really want to do some sensitive stuff, you pull out your USB stick, plug it into the computer, boot from this USB stick, work in that environment, and when you unplug it, the original hard disk is not changed. Not a bit on the hard disk is changed. So that's very easy. That's the easiest way to circumvent a lot of the problems we talked about before. So. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope it was not too long for you. Yes, and I can only recommend, please join the crypto party if it's possible. They try to help you with the practical hands-on stuff. And it's not just my pure theoretical talk about it. Thank you very much.